about 8 lines down from the top. Okay. V'yamarava. Ein sham lepara b'fnei atma u'v'lad b'fnei atma. When you are determining the value of the case of the cow, the pregnant cow, that is damaged as it was damaged, how do you do it? So there's two options. One is you could just look at the value of the mother cow separately and the value of the fetus separately, or not, it's not a fetus, it's a newborn separately, and do the calculations there. Or you could see them as a larger unit. So Rava says you don't do it separately. You do it as one unit. Now it's a little unclear in this case how that would make much of a difference to the value. But we're going to see some similar cases in which it becomes a little more clear how it's different, and it's really the question is, as we will see, is do you view this in the larger context or in the more granular context? And I think the case of the cows is a little, it's not intuitively clear how this makes much of a difference, but we'll see some other cases where it seems a little more intuitive. And why does Rava say this? Why does he say look at it as a larger unit? If you don't say that, you're going to be putting more of a burden on the damager. Okay, now, why should we care about that? We'll see in a minute also. And it seems like this reason of Rava is watered down a little later in the Gemara. But the idea is that Rava is saying that if you look at them separately, you're going to have larger damages than if you look at them as a single unit. And now here comes some other cases that I mentioned. Similarly, if somebody causes another person's slave to lose a hand, then so the parallel would be that you don't look at the like what you would typically, you look at marketplace, right? You look at what would you accept in order for me to come and chop off the hand of your slave. Well, that's a pretty high price because right now I have a fairly, I have a useful slave when it's able-bodied, and like, what would I charge you to disable him by cutting off his hand? I'd probably demand a large sum, right? But the alternative is you compare the value of the able-bodied slave with the value of a disabled slave in the marketplace. So there it's a little more dispassionate. And, whereas I, as the owner of an able-bodied slave, would kind of discount the value of a disabled slave. I would say, like, what good is that guy? He can't do all the things he used to do. On the other hand, if you just dispassionately go to the marketplace, you'll see that maybe the slave missing a hand is not as devalued as you would think in the subjective case of your own able-bodied slave. Similarly, if you damage someone's field, so here the options are, if you have if I go, uproot a tree in your field, right? So what's the value of that tree? It's, it produces fruit or whatever, so it has some value. But if I look at it in the context of, what's the value of that whole lot, of that whole orchard? It's $1 million. And what's the value of the lot minus one tree? It's, like it's not that significant, right? So again, if you focus on the larger picture, you get a smaller value for the damage. If you focus on the granular level, you get a larger value for the damage. And Rava is saying in all these cases, we focus on the larger value, the larger perspective. Amalei Ravacha Beredu Rava Ravashi. So Ravacha says, who, if that's the rule, like you said, this is because so we're not too hard on the damager. He shouldn't have to pay too much. Like, why not? If that's the damage he caused, why are you siding with the damager rather than the damagee? And so he answers no question. Because the mazik, the damager, can say, Parama abarta izakti. I damaged the cow of yours that was pregnant. And that's how I'm going to assess the damages. So in other words, it's not because we're trying to be nice to the Mazik, to the damager. It's because he has a reasonable claim, right? He has the claim he's making is reasonable. It's more objective to look at the larger picture than it is to look at the more granular picture when you assess the damages. Okay. Next thing Gemara says, Pshita, it's obvious that paradachad, vlad. What happens if you have where the cow, the mother belongs to one person, and the child, the fetus, the newborn belongs to another person? You could imagine a case where if I have a pregnant cow, I can sell the interest in the ownership of the fetus to somebody else. So now it's owned separately. So Gemara says it's obvious that if that's the case, then pitma leval para. So here the Gemara is going to distinguish between two aspects of the pregnant cow's value, which are very they're very similar. The Gemara is really splitting hairs here. You have the idea of pitma, which is the cow looks healthier. You have a cow that's pregnant, so it's kind of filled out and rounded, and it's it glows. It has a pregnancy glow. So so it's worth more. A healthy looking cow is worth more than a sickly looking cow or ordinary looking cow. So that increase in value that is damaged, who does that belong to? The owner of the cow, the mother. Nifcha mai. What about? And here's where I'd say we're kind of splitting hairs. The other thing is not only does it look healthier, but like its skin is stretched, right? As the cow grows larger and larger because of the pregnancy, the wrinkles come out of the skin. Tosfos or the Miri says that maybe the skin is more valuable because the wrinkles are stretched out of it, so it makes a better hide. So this aspect of the cow's value is that is that caused by the fetus? The fetus is growing inside, and thereby it stretches out the skin and makes the hide of the mother more valuable. Maybe that belongs to the owner of the fetus, or maybe it belongs to the owner of the mother. Or Papa says it belongs to the owner of the mother cow, because after all, this makes more sense to me, because after all, it's the body of the mother that's being improved, right? So even though it might be caused by the growth of the fetus, so what? But Rav Acha says Cholkin. He says that no, we split it, because true, it belongs to, the skin belongs to the mother, but it's caused by the efforts, as it were, of the fetus, and so they split that value. The also Cholkin, and that is the rule. Okay. Next Mishnah. Hakadar, a potter, person who makes pots, clay pots. He brings his wares into private property without permission. So he's got this pottery that's on property that's not his. And along comes the owner's dog, and knocks over the pot and smashes it. Okay, so it was there without permission. Potter. So the owner, the property owner, has no liability, because who asked you to put your pots in my property where my dog broke them? No, I have no liability there. Who's come ahead? And what if the dog gets damaged by the pots? It breaks the pot and then steps on a shard and cuts its leg or something. Then the owner of the pots who brought them in the first place without permission has to pay damages. But what if you asked permission to bring your stuff in there and you got permission? Then the owner of the property of the private property is responsible, because by allowing things to be stored in your property, you are implicitly assuming responsibility for them. Here's a similar case. Now we're talking about produce, not clay pots, but the same thing. And the dog comes along and eats them. Potter. So there's no damages here because who asked you to bring your produce into my property? And what if, let's say the dog like overate or ate something that was not good for it and gets harmed? Then whoever brought in the produce, the owner of the produce, is responsible for damages to the property owner's animal. But if it was brought in with permission, then the property owner implicitly assumed responsibility, and he is responsible for the damage. What if you bring your ox into someone's yard? Without permission. When the and then this ox gets into a fight with the owner's ox, okay, and gets injured. Oh, so it gets into a fight with the dog, and the dog bites it. Potter, the owner of the property is exempt, is not liable. Again, same reason, right? Because who asked you to bring your ox into my property? What if the ox that you brought in causes damage to the owner's ox? Then the guy who brought in the foreign ox is liable. What if this ox that you brought in fell into the cistern, right? He's got water storage there. It falls in, and now the water is not potable anymore. So you're responsible for that damage. What if the a family member of the property owner was in the water cistern, and then the foreign ox wanders in, falls in there, and kills the kills the relative, the person in the pit? Then the one who owns the ox has to pay the kofar, the penalty for your for causing death. But if in all these cases, if you brought in your ox with permission, then the owner of the property is the one who's liable. Rebbe says, in all these cases, just allowing me to bring my ox into your property, that doesn't explicitly assume responsibility for damage. It's only if the property owner says, yes, you can bring in your animal and I will look after it. I'll make sure that it remains under control. Okay, so only if you explicitly accept the responsibility for the actions of the ox, then the property owner is liable. But if I just say, yeah, you can bring your ox in, maybe you want to walk it in my yard or something, but if I didn't accept responsibility for anything that damages, then that responsibility still lies with the owner of the ox. Okay, so the Gemara will analyze this a little further. Kamma, the reason that the Mishnah says that the person who owns the pots, let's say, and brings them in without permission, he's liable for damages caused by these pots to Bishus, because he brought them without permission. But if he had permission, then the owner of the pots would not be responsible for damage caused by the pots. And so what's the principle behind this? We do not say we don't say that the owner of the pots accepted liability for keeping the property owner's animal from being hurt. Mani, who's according to Rebbe. This is according to Rebbe. At the end of the Mishnah, called Bistama, where there wasn't any explicit assumption of responsibility by the property owner. Well, Kamma it doesn't accept responsibility. Okay, so that's so we're parsing the Mishnah so that the first clause seems to be according to Rebbe. But in a safer, but if you look at the second part of the Mishnah, in Hichnos B'Rshus, if he brought it in with permission, then the property owner is responsible. This goes right to the rabbis. Yeah, right. Stamaname, kabbalah, kabbalah, and Hebrew. So they say that that if you don't like, since no explicit acceptance of responsibility is mentioned here, this goes according to the rabbis that say that without any explicit assumption of responsibility, we do say that he accepts that he is liable, the property owner is liable. So how do you parse out this mission that half the first half? See, the problem is that the first half of the mission doesn't mention anything. It's silent about did the owner of the property accept responsibility. So we must assume that he did not. Okay, so then why these two different rulings, right? The two, and more Rabbi Omer B'Kulin and Chayla Jacob Lishmor. So then we wrap up by saying, yeah, Rabbi says that the property owner is only responsible if he explicitly accepts um, responsibility. Ratio is Seifa, Rabbi Msiasa, Rabbi Rabbanan. So like it makes no sense. The structure of the Mishnah seems to us to say that the first clause is like Rabbi, the second clause is like Rabbanan. Okay, that's normal. But then to wrap it up with Rabbi again, it seems from the language of the end of the Mishnah that Rabbi is arguing with the entire preceding parts of the Mishnah, but we parsed it so that he's like arguing with himself. I'm Rabbi Zera. It says the Mishnah actually was broken. It contradicts itself. Like you can't yeah. He says the structure of the Mishnah is messed up. Rava says no. The whole first part, you can't parse it out to say that the first part is Rabbi and the second part is Rabbana and then the last part is Rabbi. No, the first two parts are all Rabbana. Ubrishus. And we're talking about where there was permission given to bring this stuff into the property. Shmiras Kederos Kibala Balachatzer, Vafilu Nishbu Burah. And we're talking about where the by allowing you to bring in the pots into your property, you are implicitly accepting the responsibility for them. So even if they were, even if they were blown down by the wind. Okay, so in other words, in the first part of the Mishnah, the whole thing is like the Rabbanan. The first two, clarify the Rabbanan, and we're not going to imply from the absence of permission being granted explicitly. We're not going to imply that is what happened, but rather that there is an implicit acceptance of responsibility according to the rabbis. Okay. There's the second case of the Mishnah where you bring in produce into someone else's property. Amar Rav says, Lo shanu elo what kind of damage are we talking about? Now, I said in explaining the Mishnah, maybe the animal, overate or ate something it shouldn't have, but Rav says no. What we're talking about is, an animal like slipped on whatever stuff you brought in there, and injured itself that way. But if it ate something it shouldn't have eaten and was damaged or died, Potter, the owner of the produce is not liable. My time, why not? Shouldn't have eaten. Okay, like so we're granting the animal some kind of agency here. Like it should have known better than to eat when it's not supposed to eat or overeat or whatever. I remember Shesha said, Amina kinayim v'shachiv Rav Amal Hashmata. Rav must have been half asleep when he said this. It makes no sense. Tanya, and here's the proof from the Brisa. And those someone obviously if you place poison before the animal of your friend, you have no liability in court. But you have a moral obligation, moral responsibility. God will judge you. So this Brisa is stated about poison, right? Because like animals are endowed with enough instinct not to eat something that is poisonous for them. Peros, but something that is not poisoned, but maybe was overeaten. Davida diachla, like dogs are going to eat food, right? Then you have a legal responsibility that can be assessed by the court. So according to Rav, why? You could say the animal should have been overeaten, right? So this brisa explicitly, but the idea of this brisa contradicts Rav. So Amrei, so they said in response, "What do you feel, Paris?" No, it's not the case. You're inferring from the case of the other brisa that it's talking about poison and not regular food, right? But no, that's not a good inference. You can say the same thing applies to regular food. You're still exempt from court assessed damages. So why is it talking about poison? Not to exclude regular food, but to tell you that tell you that even poison, where you can assume that the animal has enough instinct not to eat it, nonetheless, you're still morally liable for this. That God will get you for this. So even though you can say, "Oh, I didn't do anything," the animal is stupid enough to eat the poison, still, you put the poison in front of it. You took that risk, and for that, you're morally responsible. Or you could answer, some of those name, the high new parrot. What kind of poison we're talking about? We're not talking about rat poison. We're talking about, like, for example, it's my understanding that dogs, shouldn't eat chocolate, right? Chocolate is food, right? Maybe it is the case that the dog is too stupid to know that it shouldn't eat chocolate. I mean, it tastes good, right? So the fact that it's going to be damaged, the dog doesn't know this. So, when the Brisa said, if you put poison in front of the dog, it doesn't mean rat poison. It means food that's damaging to it. And so it is. And so again, with this interpretation, we're not distinguishing between poison and food, rather than saying the same thing. Mason, they asked another question about rat. Woman comes into someone's mill to grind her wheat without permission. And while her back is turned, the cat comes along and eats her wheat. Potter, so he has no responsibility, because what's she doing in his mill without permission? And if the animal is harmed by the wheat, then she has to pay. She's liable for damages. According to Rav, why is the cat eating the food? It should know better. It shouldn't have eaten the food. So according to Rav, it would seem that the woman who brought in the food without permission into the mill should be exempt from damages caused to the cat by eating the food. So Amar, so the answer is so all right, you're going to tell me that Rav is contradicted by this brisa, but he's not by our Mishnah. Like our Mishnah says, supports Rav. And Rav attributes that case where the animals said it's slipped on the produce, not they ate the produce. So that's a good source. So don't try to prove me wrong from a brisa. Rav has support in this Mishnah. So what's the question in the first place? You'd say, I understand the Mishnah Katani imhuska bahen. It was harmed by the produce. You can understand that's a reasonable assertion to mean that it's almost like the produce leaps out and attacks the dog, right? It's not quite that way, but it's like it ascribes a more kind of active role to the produce. So it's reasonable to assume that what the Mishnah is talking about, to interpret what the Mishnah is talking about, is that the animal is damaged by, let's say, slipping on the produce, not by eating it. But in the brisa, katane imhuska, katane behen. It leaves out the word by them, right? By the produce. So when you just say about food that the animal is damaged by food, and the natural interpretation is achilu miktani, and that's talking about eating. And so they're talking about two. So that's that is the basis of the question. In other words, maybe it's not the case that the Mishnah can still be easily interpreted according to Rav. So okay, but the more answers, yeah, it is. We don't accept that distinction that you've made. So it's not really a problem for Rav, although like good question, but but uh, the basis of the assumption for the question is not that. Tashma, one more time. Hichnis Shoro. 1 second. Yeah, Hichnis Shoro lechatzar ba'albai shelo b'rishus. Person brings his ox into someone's property without permission. V'yachal chitin, and the ox eats wheat. V'hitris u'meis. And basically, Hitris, I think, he translates here, developed diarrhea and it died. So basically, it died from eating, maybe it was spoiled meat or whatever. So Potter, then the property owner is not liable. But if he allowed the ox to come in, then he's liable. Why don't we say, according to Rav would say the animal should know better than to eat this. Rav answers, Rishus ashalo b'rishus karabis. How are you asking, how are you, where Rav made the statement, he was talking about no permission to enter. And you're trying to prove your case, to ask against Rav from a case where there was permission given to enter. Birashus, what's the difference? When there's permission granted, Shmir al Shoro Kigolav, then you're implicitly accepting responsibility for the ox. But like even if the ox choked itself. So like even if like a bizarre accident happened, okay, if you implicitly accepted responsibility for the ox, then you're responsible. What Rav was talking about was you did not accept responsibility, and so there's a whole different level of responsibility that applies, and so you can't ask from one to the other. And this is a good place to stop for today. So let's do that. We'll pick it up here tomorrow. Have a good day, everybody.
Dr. Koa, have a great day. Thank you.